Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to another recommendations video. This video is going to be It's Always Been You recommendations, and this video is sponsored by my channel members. Once a month I try to do my very best to have a poll available for some of my channel members who are at that level, and they get to pick a video they want to sponsor. It's also make sure that that video gets filmed is kind of what it is as well, because I get a lot of ideas and I don't always get around to posting them, so this is a way to make sure that that happens. And so yeah, this one won and I was very excited to do this. This was also one that was suggested in my video recommendation form, which is always available in my description down below. If there's a type of video or certain recs you would like to see, I won't always get around to it right away. Some people ask for recs that I've just done videos for, or I don't have more recommendations for, but I always try to keep them in mind when I'm planning content. So this one really intrigued me because I think there are different kinds of It's Always Been You, whether that's a second chance romance, whether it's one where there is a separation because of time or differences, or whether it's just, maybe it's a shorter amount of time, but when you're with that person, it's like it was never going to be anyone else, right? So there's a few different interpretations of It's Always Been You, and we're going to dive into the 10 that I have to share. First off, I want to say the one that's not going to be in here, even though now I'm mentioning it, is I'm not going to be putting It's Always Been You, which is a book by QB Tyler, because that's not one that I super recommend, but I don't think it's a bad book. It just, when I hold it up to these other books that I have in here, I feel like these relationships are a lot more It's Always Been You than the adopted brother and sister scenario. There's nothing wrong with it, but we're gonna go. So the first one I'm going to share will probably not surprise longtime viewers of this channel, and also if you heard me describe the scenarios, I think this one sticks out. And I'm going to talk about the Outlander series for It's Always Been You. For me, I think the It's Always Been You really becomes more clear in Dragonfly and Amber and Voyager, but it all starts in Outlander, which, in case you don't know, because you know what? There's new readers every day. But Outlander is a bit more of a historical fiction, but it also has fantasy elements mixed in because it is a time travel romance. And, but to me, the romance is what pushes this book forward, like the romance between Jamie and Claire, and also other romances we get introduced to throughout the series. And so for me, why I love this series is the romance, whereas I know for other people, they won't call this a romance or whatever. I don't care. It is to me. That's what's the most important. And even if it's not, even if you want to call it a historical fiction or a historical fantasy, whatever it wants to be called, you can't deny that the couple in this series, it's always been them for each other. And so we have Claire, who is in her 20s, and she's in 1940s Scotland with her husband, who they've been separated because of the war. And so they go to Scotland for a second honeymoon. Also, her husband, who he's quite a bit older than her, he is very into searching out his lineage and genealogy. And so he's here to meet with a man called Reverend Wakefield that's been helping him research his history. And Claire's just there to relax and hopefully have them get back to who they are after being separated for the war. And then when she goes on a trip one day to collect some plants, because she is kind of into, I want to call it herbology, which is not what it's called. That's Harry Potter. She gets pulled through the standing stones at Craignadoon and finds herself in the 1740s of Scotland, right in the middle of a bunch of shit going down. And that's where she meets Jamie Fraser, who's been injured. She helps him out, and she goes about trying to find her way home, but eventually isn't so sure if that's what she wants to do. Now, because I'm talking about this series as a whole, why this is It's Always Been You is, to me personally, this has always felt like a type of fated mate tale. what pulls Claire back to this time. There's lots of things we discover as we read this series, but to me it becomes clear that part of the reason that happens is that she's always meant to be with Jamie Fraser. Like, that is how time is supposed to play out. And there are times of separation for them, sometimes decades worth, and they still always find their way back to each other. And it's perfect. Like, this book stands alone to me as like one of the best creations I've ever read, and I don't say that lightly. So that's my first one. Next, I want to recommend a book that I just read, and you will be able to read very soon. It's not out yet, but this book came to mind immediately when I thought of this topic, and that is Resting Witch Face by Juliet Cross. This is book 5 in the Stay a Spell series, and this is a second chance romance. I don't want to spoil much about this book at all because it's been highly anticipated by many of us who are lovers of the series. This is the couple. We hear about them from book 1. We know there's something going on and the tension's just building and we want to know what happened. But Jules and Ruben, they dated for a short period of time. He's a vampire overlord of New Orleans. She is the witch enforcer and she is a siphon. She helps keep the peace and keep things going well, and they date for a brief period of time, and we don't know what happened or why they broke up, but it's now 12 years later, and Ruben has decided that enough is enough. Jules, Juliana, your time is up. We're supposed to be together. It's going to happen. And so this vampire overlord goes on his mission to make it happen. While they actually need to go on a road trip together through parts of the United States and then through Europe to see to a few things. And yeah, that's how they are forced into this forced proximity. There's only one bed. There is a vampire masquerade ball. There is a Renaissance fair. There's so many amazing things. And there's swoony, you're the one for me, all the goodness in this. So I highly recommend this for an It's Always Been You rec. Then we have a darker one to share. There's Dreams of the Deadly by Adelaide Forrest. This is the first book in a duet. The second one I think isn't coming out until December, but this had a like happy for now at the end of it, so you'd be okay. But this one is actually about our heroine, her name is Thalia, and when she was younger, actually like a very young girl, she was arranged to be married with our hero, who, let me see what his name is, Calix. And he's young as well. He's 13. I think she's like 6. So he knows he's going to marry her one day. And so he becomes like protective of her. Like he's looking at her like a little sister, but also like she's going to be mine one day. So I'm looking out for her. And her father's horrible to her. He despises her really. And so he beats her. He's cruel to her even as a child. And Calix, again, he's only a young man himself. He's young. He knows that something's happening to his betrothed, and he takes steps to try to protect her, even though like he's not a grown man yet. You know, he can't physically protect her yet. He goes about finding ways to do that, and there's a horrible backlash, which caused him to actually be banished, and our heroine to just kind of be left in despair, doesn't know what happened to her betrothed. Like, she doesn't know what happened to this nice boy who was coming around and spending time with her and playing games with her, and he's just disappeared. Now it's many years later, and she's going to be given to someone else to marry. And Calix has been biding his time and strengthening his power so that he can come back and get his bride, because he wants to kind of rescue her from what she's living in, but also she was meant to be his. And so like a line on the back is like, the time has come to make Thalia mine. So definitely for Calix, Thalia, it's always been her for him. And this book has a lot of dirty, kinky things in it too, because Adelaide Forrest brings it all, but I love it. Then we have a sweet historical, actually, and this is one that it's more of like neither of them even realizes it's always been the other person, and I really like that. And for me, that's A Daring Pursuit by Kate Bateman. So this one is actually kind of like, I want to call them like frenemies to lovers, what I want to say, because like there's a feud between the two families in this series. Like it starts with the first one, and so the Davies and the Montgomerys, like they've been locked in a feud, and so as kids, they like, when the two families' kids would meet up, they would like tease each other, and like each Montgomery had like a Davies that they would like pick on, and that's kind of what would happen. But in the last book, their siblings got married. I think it's his sister and her brother get married, and so now they're around each other more than ever, and the families are, you know, cooling the feud down because they've been linked in marriage. And Karis, she is doing everything she can to avoid marriage. She got herself in kind of a compromising position with a man who totally abused that situation, and so she doesn't feel like she's good enough to marry, but she also feels like she didn't really get to experience the plus sides that come with being a ruined woman because she was with such a jerk, you know. And then we have Tristan, who, you know, like we said, he's always kind of picked on her, but it's clear that a lot of the reason he did that is because he has a thing for her. And when he kind of overhears that she's being blackmailed by the jerk who ruined her, he really goes about trying to kind of like rescue her idea of what can be between a man and a woman. And so they start kind of this like secret affair where during a house party for a limited amount of time, they're going to have an affair. And it really becomes clear that they both have had feelings for each other for a while, and that a lot of their like animosity is because they liked the other person. But Tristan, he's like, well, there's no way I can ever be with Karis. Like, she's too wild. She's not right for me. But of course, the more time they spend together, that veil is kind of lifted from his eyes, and he realizes that he's being kind of foolish about all that, you know? And I don't know, for me, it just becomes clear that it was always the other person for them. Like he's an architect, and one of the reasons why this to me is it's always been you, is that he's now like going to be building his family home, and he has been working on it, and without even realizing it, he's been designing parts of his home with her in mind, like colors that she loves, things that remind him of her. And so when he takes her to visit his home at one point, he realizes that he was building his house for the two of them, even though he thought that could never happen. So that was swoony as hell to me, and it was very much like, it's always been you. All right, then we have one. I call this series like semi-dark because it has dark romance elements. Like, this is a motorcycle romance, so usually motorcycle is gonna be dark, but the interactions between the hero and the heroine are all very sweet and very beautiful. This book does also have, there is a hero with PTSD, and there's talk of sexual violence, but there isn't really any on the page. And so it's a taboo relationship, but nothing happens till the heroine is 18. And I really, really love this one. And for the heroine, this is one like for the heroine, it's always been the hero since she was young. So this is Truly's Biker by Misty Walker. This is book 2 in the Royal Bastards MC. And so the heroine, so how do I explain this? So Rock was I think he was in the army is what it was. And he had kind of a buddy in the army. I'm going to say army. I could be wrong about that. And this guy died kind of saving his life. And so when he gets out, he goes to visit this guy's widow and daughter. And Truly is that daughter. And so for the next like 10 years, he's kind of always been around, like taking care of them, helping with different things. And like, she has just had feelings for him growing all this time. And now that she's legal, she's not going to wait around for him anymore. But then now he is interested. Like, it's a hard thing. It's one of those. So this does have a pining heroine, but it's also this kind of story where she's not going to pine anymore. And so, and then it's the hero realizing like, oh shit, I think I really want her. Have I fucked this up too bad? Does that make sense? That's what I mean. So I don't know. This is one, this doesn't maybe quite fit this trope as well as some of the others I'm mentioning, but I like to recommend some of the books outside the box for these tropes. And number one, like, I just really love this series by Misty Walker. I don't like a lot of motorcycle clubs. I just don't really jive with it. But this series does it with a very light touch while still having the found family aspects of it and like that, like, do anything for your brother type thing. So I really enjoyed that one. Then we have another historical, and this one is A Marriage in Trouble. This one is an estranged couple. This is Lady Isabella's Scandalous Marriage, and this is book 2 in the Mackenzie McBride series. So this book actually comes right after The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie, which is one of my favorite historicals of all time. It's fantastic. And this one is about Lady Isabella and then Mac Mackenzie. So 6 years ago, they like eloped and got married together. And the thing is, Mac was an alcoholic and he didn't cheat on her, but he would paint nude models. And so it was assumed he had mistresses. He's an artist, an eccentric artist. And him and Isabella just kind of kept, like, he kept hurting her. And then there was a pretty bad miscarriage. Isabella and Mac are just like super broken up about it. And it was just really like a really tragic thing for both of them. And Isabella is like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. And so she leaves him and they live in separate houses for the next many years. And now Mac has gotten sober. He is back and he's ready to like get Isabella back again. And he wants to win her back. And so he ends up getting her to agree to sit for a nude photo. And this is giving them opportunities to fall in love again. So this book is really close to my heart because I've shared many times I had an alcoholic father for many years who got sober, and I know that like making amends, it's one thing to be making amends if you're, you know, going through the program or something, but it's another thing when it's like you've really hurt people you love, and have you hurt them so much that they can't forgive you? And if they do forgive you, can they ever trust you the way that they once did? And I think that Jennifer Ashley does a beautiful job exploring that. And this couple, I mean, they have a lot to go through for sure, but it's really beautiful seeing them get their second chance. And they definitely have always been it for each other. Okay, then I actually have like, it's kind of a duet thing because the author wrote the first part of their story as like a novella, but really like it goes together. You should just read it together. And so that's going to be Protecting You and Fighting for Us by Claire Kingsley. And this book, like, this takes place in the past. Like, this is the beginning of this couple's relationship. They were friends, Grace and Asher, and it moves into more. And then there is something horrible that happens, and Asher ends up going to prison. And so then we are many years later, and he's getting out of prison, and he barely survived it, just mentally and even physically, like he barely survived it. And he expects to get back home, and like he has many brothers. Like, this is the Bailey Brothers series. There's four other books that come after this one, so we get to see all the Bailey brothers in it. But he doesn't feel like he connects with them anymore. He doesn't feel like who he was. He can't be a firefighter anymore because he's a convicted felon. And so there's so much that he had to give up. And Grace has been waiting for him this whole time. And he is, number one, stunned that she waited. And two, very angry that she waited because he was hoping to just come back and forget what happened in the past. And here's Grace still loving him and wanting to marry him. And he just is like, I'm not who I was before. But for the both of them, it's always it's always been them, you know, like even before they were romantic, they were really good friends. And so Grace kind of refuses to let him turn his back on that. So highly recommend these books. You know, just get these first two, just read them all together. There is, you know, a time jump between these, but just get into them, go through it. It's amazing. The audiobooks are really good for this series. Highly recommend. Then I absolutely have to mention Between Wrath and Mercy. This couple, absolutely for this couple, It's Always Been You. This one has like a 16-year gap between them though, because something tragic happens in the beginning that keeps Emma and Rain apart. So he's the crown prince of their land. She and her sister were twin sisters. He was actually supposed to marry her twin, but I mean, when we hear from like his point of view, like he was never going to end up marrying her sister because they were both in love with other people, but Emma didn't know that at the time that her sister died, and so she ends up just feeling horribly guilty that she was in love with her sister's betrothed, and then she died, and she feels like she betrayed her sister in that way, and so she runs away from Rain. And I mean, he says some horrible things in the moment. They're both grieving. Like, he does really care for her sister, even if he loves her and not her sister. And so there's a lot of pain that they're dealing with, and she kind of runs away and is forced to marry someone else. And then she never sees him again until her daughter and her husband disappear. And it becomes clear they were kidnapped, and she needs help. And so she goes to the prince. And so now we get to see what the prince has been up to all this time and how he plans to get her back and help her get her daughter back. And so I love this book so much. So Between Wrath and Mercy and then Between Despair and Hope are out so far, and there will be 2 more books in that series, but you can dive in. You can dive into it. It's great. It's good. Okay, and then I have 2 more that are mafia for you. Okay, so I of course have to share Bloody Heart by Sophie Lark. This one is a definitely It's Always Been You. Like, oh, this one, in my opinion, is her angstiest book. Like, I'm in my head now, I'm just thinking and looking. To me, this is her angstiest book. It really is. So this one, we have Dante, and I think he's like 20. I think so. And then we have our heroine, who I think she's like 17 going on 18. They could both be teenagers. I don't remember what their ages are. It doesn't matter. They're young. They're both really young. And what happens is actually Dante is like doing a job and because there's mafia family in here, and he steals a car, and it turns out to be like Simone's ride. And Simone is actually the daughter of a diplomat, and so that's why she would have a fancy car. And so he actually like hijacked this car, and he ends up still like bringing her home in it, but they have this crazy like chat while he's like driving his car, and they start a relationship when they're young. And then there comes a night where like her family now knows who she's dating, and they like forbid her to see him, and she's like, no, I'm gonna see him, and they're like, he's a dangerous guy. And of course, the night that they're going to meet to discuss this, he shows up covered in blood, and he's been through a pretty crazy experience, and she's like, wow, my family's right. He's dangerous. And Simone is pregnant, and she doesn't tell him because she's scared. And honestly, she has reason to be scared, right? Like, mafia, scary, okay? And it's confirming everything her family said, even though her family proves to be less than trustworthy and not very good to her. She's just trying to do what's best. And so then we jump ahead 8-9 years, and Simone has not lived a happy life. She's actually had given her son to be raised by her sister. She's a model, and Dante joined the army. He has become hardened. He is never loved another woman, never even tried. And then he is home, and he gets assigned, I believe, to like work a job, and it ends up being like protecting, I think, Simone's dad or something at an event. And Simone ends up going to this event, and they see each other again. And it's like no time passed, and also so much time has passed. And Dante, when he finds out the truth of what's been kept from him, he's pretty angry about it. He's pretty angry about it. But this couple, guys, like, this will rip your heart out for sure. It will. It's beautiful. Sophie knows how to gut to you for sure. And then the other Mafia one I have to recommend is actually Toxic by Maggie Cole. And this one is an interesting It's Always Been You, okay? And I'll tell you why. Because with this one, these young ones, this is Bridget and Dante, I believe. And if you read, because this is a spin-off series, Mafia Wars New York is a spin-off from her Mafia Wars series. And Bridget is like the sister of the O'Malleys, I believe. She was Bridget O'Malley. And like, she had dated Dante briefly when they were in high school. And Dante didn't behave the best because things were really serious with her. And he fucked it up. He fucked it up. And so she moves away to go to school and like be around the O'Malley family. She's not an O'Malley because she marries an O'Malley. That's what happens. Sorry. It's been a while. Don't yell at me. I'm sorry. She marries into the O'Malley family. And she loves Sean. She's with Sean O'Malley, and they're together, and he gets killed in a pretty horrible way. And then she needs to get away from the O'Malleys for reasons, and so she ends up back in New York. And Dante just knows that something's wrong, and there's secrets that Bridget is keeping, and he wants to help. But, you know, again, like, things didn't get left off on the best foot with him, and she's like, oh, you just want to be with me now that I'm like a widow and all these things. So there's so much going on. This is a very messy story. It is called Toxic for a reason, but also, like, this book really is a cap on the other series because we hated Bridget. We hate Bridget when we're reading Mafia Wars because she's keeping some secrets that cause other people a lot of pain. She has reasons. Like, I've forgiven her for those reasons at this point, but it's heavy. Like, it's a lot. And Dante's the one who's able to kind of bring that out of her. But for the both of them, there was always that spark back from when they were children, even though, you know, she loved someone else. She had a great marriage with someone else. It doesn't take much for her and Dante to be pushed back together again. So, all right. So there you go. Those are my It's Always Been You recommendations. Of course, there are a ton more. I didn't want this to just be second chance romance recs. Like, I wanted there to be some other ones mixed in as well. But I'd love to hear what some of your favorites are for this trope. And yeah, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I put up new recommendations all the time. Again, thank you to my channel members who sponsored this video. And if you'd like to check out channel memberships and support what I do here, I have all those links down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.